This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 20 with Safiétou Seck. This is a bonus episode. Today is June 4th, 2021. Hello, world. Welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This episode is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Hello, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth. I'm so glad you're listening to today's episode. Today is a bonus episode with Safiétou Seck. Safiétou Seck is a dreamer who decided to pursue her dream after trying the traditional route. She went to school, became an economist, but she couldn't shake this burning desire she had to pursue a career in fashion. So we talk about her transition from working as an economist to becoming a high-end fashion designer. And with her high-end fashion brand, SARAYAA Fashion, Safitou secured an investment from a woman-led investment fund. She talks about the challenges of starting a fashion brand and obtaining financing. She also touches on how a special encounter with Michelle Obama helped her take a leap of faith. She shares advice for up-and-coming entrepreneurs. Here is Safiétou Seck. Safiétou Seck, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I can't wait to find out more about your story. So can you tell us a little bit about you and what you do?
Yes, so my name is Safiétou Seck. I am from Dakar, Senegal, West Africa. I am the founder of the brand SARAYAA, which is a high-end, tradi-modern clothing brand for women, created in November 2014. And I'm an economist by training, but I'm passionate, about fashion. So in a nutshell, this is me.
You were an economist. How did you transition into the fashion world?
I think I have always been a designer because, growing up, I was designing my own clothing and, at home they call me the artist because, I had a very different way of dressing myself. But it was not an option to be a designer because, the African context, socially, it's very difficult to just get up and say that, you want to become a designer. You have to be a doctor or you have to be, something quote unquote more serious. I said, okay, it's done. Maybe I'm going to be an economist. But, you push away, your passion, but your passion is coming back. I'm here. So basically I went to the States, I did my studies over there. I went to Spelman College. I have a Bachelor of Arts, in economics. And then I did my MBA at American University. And I opened a boutique in Georgetown, Washington, D.C. And people seemed to like it. Actually, people liked it very much. So I thought, you know what? Okay, so maybe you should just go back home, in Senegal and do it because the United States had signed a bill that would allow 40-something countries, African countries, to export to the States tax-free. So I thought, maybe I should just go back and do it, out there. So I went back home and got scared, so I didn't do it. So I ended up at the American Embassy and, worked there for 7 years and had a trigger over there and then decided to launch my brand and here I am.
So I read in an article that an interaction with a special first lady kind of recentered you towards your path. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, that was definitely a trigger. Like I had several of them, but this one kind of opened my eyes. Like I was working at the American Embassy and Barack Obama and his wife visited Senegal in 2013. I was part of the team that was taking care of the logistic. And I had a dress on, and the dress was a dress that I had designed. This lady, she was part of the presidential delegation. So she comes to me and she's like, your dress is amazing. And I was like, yeah. I designed it. And she was like, oh my goodness, Mrs. Obama will have loved to have your dress. For me, that was a trigger. But then when I went back home, I was like, I really have to do it. So that was in 2013. And in 2014, I left the American Embassy and I created SARAYAA.
You were working at the American Embassy and someone from Michelle Obama's team told you that she would love to have your dress. So did you figure out a way to get the dress to her?
No, like that was completely forbidden, like working at the American Embassy, like, close to Mrs. Obama or even send somebody, like that was impossible. The rules were so strict and unfortunately I wasn't able to.
Well, at least it gave you the reassurance that you had what it takes to get into high fashion.
Absolutely.
My sister and I have actually been working on an African-inspired fashion collection for kids for over a year. We didn't know much about the fashion business before taking that on, and it's really a passion project for us.
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking there are probably people listening right now who are interested in getting into the fashion industry. What advice would you give to someone who wanted to get into fashion or become a designer but wasn't sure where to start?
You really, really, really have to be passionate because there are a lot of challenges and passion is what's going to make you stick in it. So that's number one. Number two, you have to know your market. Knowing your market is extremely important. Knowing the people, your clients, what they want, and knowing also, where you could get, all the inputs, the fabric and the availability of all the elements needed to basically have a fashion line. I am lucky to be in a country like Senegal, and Senegal is a destination for fashion. I mean, it's known everywhere. So you find everything in Senegal, all type of fabrics, everything. I think that would be a very good way to start, but you have to do your homework.
I'm glad you highlighted that because I think in fashion and just in business in general, sometimes we just get started without really knowing our market or even studying our audience, and it's so important. So
Yep.
You're now based in Senegal. When I was doing research, I read that your company secured a multiple six-figure investment.
Mm-hmm.
How hard was it to get financing as a fashion designer? Can you walk us through that journey?
That's the first, basically, in Africa for a fashion brand to be financed by an investment fund. But not only that, an investment fund that was founded by women. In Africa, people are not really interested into financing fashion at all. I mean, like for years, I've been, dealing with going to banks and all the financial institutions and being rejected. It really did not work at all. I mean, because fashion is not a sexy business to them. People don't take you seriously. I was talking to this lady. I said, listen, I have a business, but I really need to scale up. I told her about my story about this young African-American actress. Her name is Tiona Paris, who wore one of my tops and she published it on Instagram. So everybody went nuts and everybody wanted to have the same top. And I could not provide it. That's how I started to look for funding. And she was like, oh, I belong to a club and we are raising funds for women's business. So please give us, your business plan. And, we look into it. I met them the first time and it went very, very, very easy. I met them about a year ago and a year later, we signed. They enter capital of the company. So we are in it together now.
You mentioned that this was a first in Africa. So essentially the success of your brand can open doors for many more designers after you.
Oh, absolutely. There is always a first to encourage people. Before it was extremely difficult. I mean, you have a lot of initiatives, in Africa, but still, I mean, There is nothing major yet, Now we have open ways, for all designers who are interested into being financed, to let them know that, basically it's possible. But you really, 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 really have to be, have to have all the elements, you really have to be passionate because there are a lot of challenges into the fashion business.
What are some of the things you wish you had known before starting your brand?
So what that I wish I knew before, maybe it would be the financing part. That would be very challenging, to find financing for the fashion business, for sure.
So did you just self-finance up until, I guess, recently?
Absolutely, absolutely. For the 6 years of my company's life, I was self-financing.
Can you take us back to your childhood? So were you raised by your father?
I was raised by my father. He used to be in the army. He basically raised some military kids. He had 4 girls and 1 boy.
So maybe some of the resilience and strength that you have is actually also from that upbringing.
Absolutely.
Did you receive any financial education as a child?
No, but my economic degrees really helped me in my venture. I mean, it's been such a help because remember at the beginning I was telling you about when you asked me what are the elements that are necessary, to basically start a fashion business. It's like you have to know your market. Well, that's economy. That's macroeconomy. So I was really able to study the Senegalese market, to study the African market, and to be able to build a business model that will allow me to have SARAYAA today. Yeah.
Okay. Can you share one of the big money mistakes you made and what you learned from it?
Sorry, I cannot think of one because I'm very careful. And being a daughter of the military, I anticipate a lot in everything I do, especially in my business. But as of now, I can't think of one, honestly. That on top of, having a degree in economics, who says economies mean that you have to save your money? You see what I'm saying?
Okay. So how about some rapid fire questions?
Go ahead.
A book that changed your perspective on life?
I wouldn't say a book, but I would say Joel Osteen. The minister Joel Osteen. Mm-hmm. I'm sure he has a book, but listening to him has basically changed everything in my life. I think that just his perspective on life in itself, on God, he was part of me coming out of, depression. Definitely. Mm-hmm.
One thing about money you wish you could tell your younger self?
Money is definitely not the most important things. Money doesn't keep you grounded. It makes a difference in the way you live. But money is not everything.
Tell me about the best investment in yourself you ever made.
I think going to Spelman College, definitely, going to America, to an African-American school, definitely was a good investment. And also the fact of, creating my clothing company was definitely another one because it really is my baby. It basically gives me a purpose. Waking up every day and having a purpose.
Fill in the blanks in 3 words or less. Money to me is?
Not everything.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Being seen as a grateful person.
It's been a pleasure having you on the Dreamers podcast. I recently received my jacket from SARAYAA Fashion and I just can't get enough of it. So can you tell our listeners where they can find you and learn more about you?
Well, you can go on the website. We have a new website and the name of the brand is SARAYAA, SARAYAA. Our Instagram is @SARAYAA Fashion. So at the end of SARAYAA, you have 2 A's. For the website, you just go on sarayaa.shop. And also, of course, you will see more if you go on YouTube, SARAYAA, you'll have more information about myself, my journey, and my brand.
That's great. So I will make sure to include that in the episode show notes as well.
Excellent.
And thank you again for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Safiétou Seck. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Unfortunately, this episode is much shorter than usual due to poor audio quality. So some parts of the conversation had to be cut off, which is why it's a bonus episode. Coming up on the podcast, we have author and personal finance podcaster Marcus Garrett, business strategist, best-selling author, and multimedia entrepreneur Tina Wells, television anchor and personal finance columnist turned entrepreneur, author, and podcaster Bobby Rebel. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers Podcast. You can find today's show notes and all of the links mentioned during the episode at dreamoflegacy.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. I read every single review and I'll select one review to read on the podcast every month. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, tag me on Instagram at thedreamers.podcast and let me know what you liked about it. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers Podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.